So you guys do not have to worry about looking at the Facebook feed, although it'll be on Facebook here in a minute. Actually, it's there now. So you guys don't have to worry about looking at the Facebook feed at all. But let's go ahead I have on my clock 10:09, and so we'll get started probably right at 10:10.
I think we lost Nancy.
Oh, she'll hop back on. Oh, we did, yeah. I'll let her back in once she pops in. She did say she was having some didn't she say when she hopped in she was having a couple internet issues at the house?
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I mean, we got 5 folks watching already, so that's good. I'll give Nancy a minute or two, and then if she pops back in, we'll jump on in and get started. So Shatel, you were saying before that you're used to getting roughly about 20 or 30 referrals a month.
Yeah, so self-referrals. So we're not advocate referring, but self-referrals maybe 25 to 30 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've definitely doubled the number this month.
So I guess if you threw in the advocate referrals, how many referrals do you think you typically get a month?
Typically, maybe about 40, 45. But sometimes those, they overlap, right? Okay. So sometimes the client may refer themselves and the advocate not know that the client referred themselves, and they give me some of the same names. So if we're just talking raw numbers without consolidating, maybe about 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, I think what I'm going to do is I think I am going to actually go ahead and get this show rolling. I will watch out for Nancy. So as soon as she comes back in, I'll let her back in. But I think, for now, I think we can probably go ahead and get the party going. And then Nancy will hop back in. We have a good group watching, so I don't want to hold them up too long. So let's just go. I'm gonna welcome everybody. This is such an important conversation. This conversation started between PADV and Viewpoint Health, man, last year, I think, if I remember correctly, where we started talking about the idea of putting on an event that talked about just the intersectionality of mental health services and domestic violence services. And we wanted to bring together advocates and people who worked in the profession so that we could really start to talk about how we can best support survivors of both and what happens to a survivor when they do meet in the middle and how we can support them. And I think, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of how this conversation got started for all of us. And then here we are now kind of broadening the conversation to talk about it a little bit deeper. Am I correct in my assessment there?
Yeah, you're right. It was actually Nancy's idea. She approached me and said, what do you think about doing a summit, like a mental health and domestic violence? And this little brainstorm turned into an all-day event with almost 100 people. We had such an amazing turnout. I was afraid nobody was going to show up, but we had more demand than what we could handle. So, and then we started planning another one right before COVID hit. And so our plans are not squashed, they're on hold.
Man, and I think that this is amazing. And so before I'm already ready to, I got my questions lined up. I'm ready to jump in, but I have not done a very good job of being your host. And I want to give you both some time to really introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, who do you work for? And we'll start with Jennifer. Jennifer, tell us who you are, who you work for. What you do? What do you do?
Well, first of all, Jeffrey, I think you're a great host. You're doing a great job. So thank you for having me today. I'm Jennifer Hibbard, and I serve as the CEO for Viewpoint Health. And Viewpoint Health is the community service board that serves Gwinnett, Rockdale, and Newton counties. And a community service board is your local, friendly mental health and substance abuse provider. And we also serve adults with developmental disabilities. And when I say community, I mean that we take anybody who needs our services. If you are uninsured or have low income and can't afford services, we can still provide services and treatment. We also take Medicaid and Medicare and most of the big private insurance, but our main charge as a safety net for the state is to serve those most vulnerable who can't access care.
Awesome. And Shatel, same question, man. Who are you? Who do you work for? You know, I don't know you, right? But no, more importantly, I think not necessarily who you work for, but what do you do? And I think that's probably the more important question.
Got you. What do I not do? So I am Shatel. I am the crisis mental health advocate at PADV. I'm currently stationed in the State Families Office. So primarily, I interact with clients who have come to the courthouse to get a protective order. Of course, we do take outside referrals, so it doesn't have to be that they decided to actually go through with the protective order process. But essentially, my specialized population are individuals who have both barriers of mental health and domestic violence, and trying to make sure that we are balancing, or at least juggling as best as possible to serve both of those needs simultaneously.
Cool. Well, man, Nancy is just joining again. So I'm going to take a second to introduce myself. Hey, Nancy. I am Jeffrey Brown. I'm the VP of Development and Marketing for Partnership Against Domestic Violence. And I get the privilege to do this, man. I enjoy the fundraising side of what I get to do, but the marketing side is just as important. And ever since COVID hit, we've been kind of running through these Facebook Lives and saying, how can we bring new and fresh content to people who really need it? If we're all kind of sheltering in place or doing some level of that these days, then we all have time to kind of pick up or start what we're doing and learn a little bit more about domestic violence and its impact on a whole host of areas. So that's me, that's what I get to do. And our fearless leader rejoined the conversation. So I'm going to give her a second to talk about herself. And then I'm going to ask her the first question. So Nancy, tell us who you are and what you do and why is it so important?
Okay, great. Sorry, my power went out for a minute, so my Wi-Fi went out. So
man,
hopefully everything stays calm. I'm Nancy Friauf. I'm CEO of Partnership Against Domestic Violence, and it is so important because unfortunately domestic violence impacts every section, every segment of our community, and home should be the safest place, not the most dangerous. So we work hard every day to create that safety for folks.
That's awesome. And so Nancy, the first question is to you. I think I ask it every week whenever we have one of our partners on, is why are partnerships like this, the one between PADV or Partnership Against Domestic Violence and Viewpoint Health, why are they so important?
So we did a strategic plan 3 years ago, and we said, how can we really be more impactful in this work? Do we want to expand our shelters? Do we want to expand our shelter beds? And we said, if we expand our shelter beds, we're not meeting our mission, which is to end the crime of intimate partner violence and empower its survivors. Because if we build more beds, it's just saying that there's more victims that need shelter services. And what we realized is the way that we really grow our impact and we really work towards ending the crime is that we bring in all those folks who are a part of doing this work, and we partner with them and we learn from them, and we figure out how do we work together to be more impactful and to reach more people. And so that's why folks like Viewpoint Health are so critical, because they see people that we will never see. And the more that they know about domestic violence and are able to address it with folks, again, the more impact that can happen. And we see folks that have mental health issues that we don't have the knowledge and expertise to address. So having a partner that we can bring in and that can train us and that can work with those folks, is going to help those people be more likely to be successful and to be violence-free. So it's just critical for our work.
That's awesome. Thank you, Nancy. And then Jennifer, I want to throw it to you really quickly. What impact does domestic violence, so the actual abuse, have on a survivor who is struggling already with mental health issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody who is already struggling with mental health issues that experiences domestic violence is going to be at increased risk for additional trauma. So many of you have heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, an abusive relationship is trauma. So even if you already have underlying depression or anxiety, abuse will also trigger a trauma reaction. It could also increase risk of substance use. Alcohol abuse could be used to try to numb or escape. And even more seriously, abuse could trigger suicidal thoughts, feelings of hopelessness, feeling trapped, feeling like there's no way out, could contribute to suicidal thoughts or actions. And then also in the mental health and behavioral health or substance abuse world, whatever term you use, we also really take into consideration psychosocial factors. So not just the symptoms of the mental illness or the substance use, but relational issues, housing issues, economic issues, all contribute to somebody's overall mental well-being.
So really, like you just opened up like 3 doors, and I don't really know which door to go down or which door to go in. But like what you're describing is when you think about the time that we're living in right now, with social unrest and COVID-19, I'm assuming you guys have to be on some level gearing up for, you hate to say aftermath, but the effects of all of that trauma on people. You have to be on some level as an organization saying, all right, how do we best support not only survivors, but just people who are going through a lot mentally right now?
Yeah. Well, I think you brought up COVID-19. Individuals that are experiencing depression or even more serious symptoms of paranoia or hallucinations or delusions, the abuse can trigger even more paranoia especially if the intimate partner is being manipulative and verbally and psychologically abusive. But then also COVID-19 is scary, and you're listening to the news, and that can trigger paranoia and more anxiety. So I definitely think what we're going through right now in the pandemic is having an effect on everybody's mental health. And at Viewpoint, we're still open, we're available, we've got telehealth options available, but we really haven't yet experienced the full impact of our community's need for our services yet. I see that coming in the future, but we haven't fully felt the impact yet.
Man, this is already a great conversation. I'm excited. So just so that you guys know, this is supposed to last 30 minutes, and I can already tell you this is not lasting 30 minutes. This is going to go a little bit long, so just buckle up with us and be prepared because the conversation is so amazing. So for those in the comment section, those watching right now, if you have questions for Jennifer, Shatel, or Nancy, feel free, throw them in the comment section of the chat. We are monitoring that. Give us some thumbs up, a couple heart emojis, we'd love to see those in the comment section as well. My next question is really for Shatel. How do we balance the survivor's immediate need for safety and resources with their need for mental health services?
Got you. So I do want to say, when we think of the word balance, we usually think 50-50. That may not be the situation at all.
Right.
When it comes to the survivor. So for example, like I said, I'm in the courthouse, and when someone comes to see us, usually it's because they've heard about or they want to talk about either safety planning or a TPO. While we're having that conversation, the survivor may start to display those symptoms of depression or self-harm or suicidality, and we have to kind of take a step back and say, we may not be able to get your TPO today because we can't put you in front of the judge, because sometimes the judicial system doesn't align with those mental health needs, right? So my job as an advocate is to make sure that that person is in a place that they can actually go in front of a judge. So if they need some more immediate mental health needs, I may have to completely switch gears, or an advocate may have to come and find me and say, hey, I really need you to talk to this person. I don't have the training. Can you kind of just step in and talk to this person for me? So they may come to us for one thing, or they may approach Viewpoint Health and say, hey, I need mental health counseling. In the middle of that conversation, when they're doing that first assessment, they may decide, you cannot return home. Like, we cannot allow you to return to that abusive environment. And they may have to switch gears and call our crisis line and say, hey, we need some shelter for this person immediately. We cannot let this person go back home. So it's really part of the conversation with the client and what the client is ready to do. Because in the middle of that assessment, we may say, oh, that person needs a safe house, but the client doesn't want to go. So that's another conversation. How can we do that? And that's exactly why we came up together, Viewpoint Health and PADV, with an expanded, because we want to make sure that we're assessing for that psychological safety, because that's just as important as that physical safety.
And I'm assuming, see, Jennifer in one of her previous comments, she talked about the triggers that life bring, right? And so I'm assuming, in your experience, taking somebody in front of the judge can also be one of those triggers that may cause, gosh, I'm struggling with the right words, but I'm assuming just going in front of the judge and retelling your story can be a trigger as well.
Absolutely, because our courtroom is open to the public. Mm-hmm. Of course, now people are staying away from that, which is kind of good for us, because the courtroom is so small. We maybe have 2 or 3 cases going on at any time. So it's a lot easier, I think, now for clients to navigate that. But just being in front of a judge, knowing that you did nothing wrong, you're actually a victim or the survivor, is really traumatizing. And that's part of the reason we offer advocates, so that we can sit with you, just so you can have an emotional support. We're not representing you, but we do offer that that service to clients, because it is traumatizing. Even navigating the courthouse, some clients shut down. And
let me tell you, I am a victim of that. Like navigating the courthouse
every time.
It's triggering. Just I'm like, so how do I get to room 2-3CF?
Right.
And it's, take the 3rd elevator on the left, make your 4th right, go up 2 flights of stairs, go through the ramp, and you're there. And I'm like, whoa, hold up. So anyway, that's my sad attempt at a joke. Nancy, I have a question for you. Thank you. See, there's the laugh. I have a question for you, Nancy, coming your way. Why are conversations like this so important, not just to survivors, but really the community at large?
Well, I think that when a survivor is also dealing with mental health issues, I think people don't understand mental health issues. And so, unfortunately, often what happens is blaming the victim. You just act crazy. You don't know how to behave yourself. No wonder somebody would hit you, try to get you to shut up because you're talking crazy, and who would want to hear that? And mental health is not, that's not a punishable crime. Mental health is not, it's a health issue. It's not a, I get to hurt you now issue. It's something that abusers can use against their victim. We've heard lots of cases where there'll be abuse. The victim will call the police out. The abuser will go, hey, officer, she's manic depressive. She's not on her meds. She gets all crazy when she's not on her meds. She makes stuff up about what happened. Don't worry, I got it. I'll get her back on her meds and we'll get this all calmed down. And often police officers don't have the training and the knowledge that they need to understand it, and to understand about how much intervention is still needed. So I think the more that we can educate the public about the reality of mental health issues, again, it's not just that the person's crazy, it's that they have a health issue that needs to be addressed, and that having a health issue is not a reason that you get to hurt somebody.
Man. So Jennifer, I want to come to you, and I really want to dive into kind of Viewpoint Health and kind of what you guys do and how you do it. And so how do you guys assist survivors of domestic violence?
So our services are comprehensive across a broad continuum of care. We've got acute services. If somebody needs to come in for crisis stabilization in the community, we have beds available for a short-term crisis stabilization if somebody's at risk of harming themselves. We also provide detox services at that same unit. And then we also have traditional outpatient services where we can have care through a psychiatrist for medication. We have nurses on staff, therapists. We also offer group therapy for individuals. And we do provide family therapy, but our partnership with PADV has taught our therapists that in a situation where there's intimate partner violence, family therapy is not recommended. And so our focus is on the survivor and the children, and we provide those services that way. We do have very limited, but we do have some residential services as well. We do have a Shelter Plus Care grant through the Department of Community Affairs, and we can serve families. So we do have, of course, there's a lot of demand for that. So it's really it's a struggle to balance that need, but we do have that. And I did just want to add to what Nancy said regarding individuals who have mental health issues. There's a myth out there that people with mental health issues could be violent, and really people with mental health issues are more at risk and vulnerable of being a victim of a violent crime or an abusive relationship. So it's really important to make that distinction, and you do see that with even at our crisis unit, we can serve individuals who are on an order to apprehend, which Shatel, I'm sure you're familiar with that with working in the court. But what that is if two concerned people come up and say, hey, this person needs to be assessed, then a probate judge can write an order to apprehend, and the officers can pick up that person and bring them to our unit to be assessed. And sometimes we do see intimate partner violence relationships where the person who's abusing orders the apprehend as a way of controlling and manipulating. And when we're doing the assessment, we recognize that there's not really a mental health issue here. This is really a control and manipulation issue that they're using the court system to try to further abuse their partner.
Wow. So earlier, some of you guys probably saw me smile, and it wasn't because there was a joke in there. It was just I love to see the partnerships work, and just hearing everybody talk. It's like this is what it's about, right? Like PADV is very good at what we do, and it's supporting survivors. And Viewpoint Health is amazing at what they do with behavioral health. And so instead of both organizations recreating a wheel, it's like, let's just bring it together and form this awesome partnership and change the world. So that's what my smile was about. Shatel, I want to come to you really quickly and talk about how do you begin to provide services to a survivor that also has some mental health concerns. How does that process begin for you?
Got you. So I'll answer for me specifically.
Yeah.
The different who's the originating agency is going to have different kind of steps to go through. I'll talk about me specifically. If I'm seeing a client, like I said, typically they're coming to me specifically for a TPO or going through that TPO process and then refer to me. So once we start getting the paperwork drafted, that's the first thing we do is we get the narrative, right? Because we don't go through this long assessment of social determinants and all that. We don't do that for the TPO process itself. However, as we're going through the story, we're also assessing for needs. So we're not stopping you, but we're pulling those things out as we go along. So the survivor is telling us not only their history of abuse, but they're saying, oh, I'm now homeless because my abuser tried to put me out or illegally evicted me. I now have no medication because my abuser flushed it down the toilet. We hear that one pretty often. Or my abuser hides my medication from me so that when the police come, I look completely disoriented. And the law enforcement officer believes what that person said. The person has held a gun to my head and then they hid the gun. So law enforcement doesn't believe that they actually have a firearm in them. So those are things we're assessing for as we go. If that person is able to see the judge the same day, if they're in person, they can see the judge any day. Right now, remotely, we see the judge Tuesdays and Thursdays remotely. And they may go through the TPO process. We don't just leave the person there once they get their emergency TPO because we do believe in that person 360, that wraparound service. So we may partner with our ABLF social workers. And I know ABLF has been on the live before, so I won't go into too much detail. But they may have to help us get attorney representation, or they may have to help us get rental assistance or PADV. We're going to go back to PADV and our outreach workers, our supervisors, and say, hey, can we get some rental assistance for this person? Or a supportive housing program, and see if we can put them in our supportive housing program. Then my job really starts with the mental health. So then I'm going to assess, does this person have insurance? Can we go through insurance? But of course, insurance is not going to be a barrier for me because, again, we have wonderful partnerships like Viewpoint Health where we don't have to just depend on insurance. So we're going to either come to our inside therapists because we have 3 on staff, or we're going to refer to our support groups because we have so many running and we're still running virtually, which is I'm so thankful that we're running virtually still. Or we're going to go to Viewpoint Health and we're going to say, hey, you may need acute services or you may need residential services. So I come at more or less the tail end of the TPO process where after fishing out everything that we need, the mental health component now comes to the front burner. Or it may be happening opposite. So they come for a TPO, we realize that they have a mental health need, and then the intake person or advocate or intern, whoever is with us at that time, is like, hold on, let's slow down for a second. What is the immediate mental health need? We're not offering diagnosis, so that's really important. We stay in our wheelhouse. So as much as I'm fully licensed in the state of Georgia and I can offer a diagnosis, that's not my job here. My job is to do a quick surface assessment and say, now let me put you with the person, the expert that can, whether it be a diagnosis or not, talk to you and see what you need going forward. Because again, it's about that person 360. It's not just that initial assessment. It's how do we get you to live safely and violence-free going forward.
Love it.
Jeffrey, I want to ask Shatel a question, because you had said earlier that you may determine that that person's not ready to go before the judge that day. And I'm wondering what kind of things you would see that you would make that determination, and why that would mean that they shouldn't go before the judge that day.
I got you. So part of our job as advocates in the courthouse is to make sure that that person is not re-traumatized. We don't want to do that to that person. So if, for example, an abuser has flushed their medication, they have been unmedicated consistently, we can start to see what we would consider as unraveling. But it's this person just trying to make their ends meet. They're using what little resources they have remaining without maybe a medication or without seeing their therapist, because sometimes abusers do that. They stop them from going to see their therapist consistently. And they're rambling and we can't even follow what they're saying. And our judge is quick and to the point. You answer yes, no, you answer exactly what I asked you. So if we know that our judge won't be able to tolerate that, we say, okay, let me just tell you what some of our experiences in the courthouse is. If you want to go forward, we're never going to stop you. But I do also want to prepare you for what's happening. So some of the things you may see is they're rambling when they're speaking, or their thoughts are disjointed. So they may start with a story that happened in 1995, and then they're like, oh no, well in 2012, and we're like, hold on, we have to be able to follow that story cohesively, because that's how the court is really set up. But if it is a need that I'm like, this person may not be ready to go in front of the judge, but they have to go in front of the judge, we cannot send them back home. I may go before the judge and say, hey judge, I know you're busy. I know this is not a case that you typically would want to take, but I'm concerned for this person's safety. Are you willing to hear it? So usually it comes in the speech pattern. If we can see the thought pattern through the speech, that's usually what we see. Or if the person, we used to have clothing, just a box of clothing. If the person is just in tattered clothing, we want to make sure that they're dressed appropriately for court. So we would offer those services. One time I had a lady come in straight from grading. She still had the wristband on her hand from that 72-hour hold that she was on. And she was stable in terms of medication because they had gotten her crisis stabilized, but she still wasn't ready to go before the judge. So we took her to Mercy Care. We walked her over to Mercy Care. And she came back the following week and she was a completely different person. So we're just looking for things that the court may not be prepared to handle, like that unraveling, like the disjointed thoughts, to make sure that it's not re-traumatizing. That's just our goal. We're not trying to stop them from filing the TPO or do any type of filing in the courthouse. What we're trying to stop is the re-traumatization of the client.
Exactly. And I just love, I love hearing that description, because I think it gives a great example of how in depth we go when we work with our clients, and how comprehensive we are, and how much we work to be in tune with what's going on with them and where they are, and really overall, how do we serve them that's in their best interest.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely love that.
So I have a question that came in from the comments, and I don't really know who to pose this to, so I'm going to ask it and then let you guys fight amongst yourself to see the answer. But Antoine asked, what if there's a victim who is stuck in an abusive relationship with someone who suffers from mental health or drug abuse? What do we do then?
Jennifer, maybe you can speak about that.
I'll start with that because I know with a lot of this conversation, we've been focusing on the survivor, but untreated mental health issues absolutely can be a component of the person who might be perpetuating the abuse as well. Substance use, sometimes you have somebody who only will be abusive when they're under the influence of substances. So that's absolutely a concern. At Viewpoint, we serve everybody. So now it's clear that we wouldn't provide but we could separate that out, and we could also provide services for the person who was having an untreated mental illness. Really it can lead to anger and explosive episodes and abusive behavior. Paranoia can end up causing abusive behavior as well. So we can still provide that sort of services in that treatment. We would just make sure that it was separate. And we do have 3 outpatient centers in Gwinnett County, so we could even go so far as to separate the individuals to different locations so that there's not a risk of overlap.
That's right. Awesome. Go ahead, Nancy. Yeah.
I'm not going to let you ask any questions. I'm just going to
jump in. Go.
Because it's so interesting for me. I guess, Jennifer, what I'm thinking is, right, if that victim is feeling like her partner, some of the issues are mental health, I think the challenge might be convincing, and it could be him as well, but convincing the victim's partner, the victim being able to convince their partner that seeking mental health treatment would be beneficial. So what could you say to a survivor about, these are some ways that you can talk to this person that might make it more likely that they will in fact seek services?
Well, it would vary from case to case, but sometimes if there is a motivation that can be used, such as, we're doing this for the kids, or we're doing this for your job, or many times there's legal issues, and sometimes the court can impose certain requirements for that. And Viewpoint is a partner with most of the accountability courts in Gwinnett County, so and including a mental health court and a veterans court. So sometimes it does take that third-party legal requirement to get somebody into treatment. So it's, of course, without that, treatment is voluntary, unless you're at imminent harm to yourself or others. But we do, and I caution about putting all of that on the survivor to try to convince the partner to come in to services. But we do try to make all of our services accessible, and try to change some of the stigma associated with mental health treatment, to say that really mental wellness is for everybody, and that maybe we can try to come in there as far as like educational, and this is beneficial, and try to establish that relationship to be able to get that inroad into that partner.
Hey, I think Shatel has something she wants to add as well. Go ahead in there, Shatel.
That look that I want to add to my face. I do want to say, while we don't directly treat abusers, we do have great partnerships, 1, but 2, if a person decides that they want to file for a protective order because that person is unmedicated, we've seen this so many times. At our summit, we had a great speaker who said that her abuser was unmedicated, didn't know he even had any mental health issues or barriers until she realized it was passed to her children just genetically. They were predisposed. We do have relief in the law in a TPO that allows for some treatment. So it allows for those FIP classes for the abuser, where they go through and they learn what abuse is and why they're doing it, and those power and control dynamics. There's also in the Stalking Petition, there is an order that the judge can do for psychological or psychiatric evaluation. And then they're assigned to a compliance officer, and they're required to follow through with that process. We also have the drug and alcohol assessment that we can ask for in a TPO, and again, compliance officer, and they have to follow through with that. So those may be some of the court mandated things that Jennifer is referring to, that they may end up seeing the abuser through those processes through the court.
Thank you. Gosh, Antoine, awesome question. You got comment out of all 3 panelists, so I think that means you win question of the day. Jennifer, I do want to ask you a question. Like, what are the effects and impacts of repeat trauma?
So repeat trauma is something that is really serious. So oftentimes when we think about post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, we think about a single episode, a single traumatic event that has been experienced in the past. But some trauma victims could be trapped in dangerous environments where they become re-victimized. Sometimes they have to face that risk for months or even years. And so there is a term called complex PTSD. It's used to describe when somebody has experienced repeated trauma and repeated stress, and the symptoms can look different. The symptoms can look different than regular PTSD. Survivors might appear passive or withdrawn. And Shatel, I'm sure when you have somebody in the court, you probably see this, and it might appear to the judge that maybe they don't have as many effects, or maybe this isn't as serious, but having difficulty regulating their emotions, maybe they are laughing as they're saying recounting the traumatic event. Maybe they're completely flat and they're not sad at all while they're describing really horrific events, and it doesn't quite match. They might even dissociate. They might feel kind of disconnected from their emotions and the event. They could also feel a lot of shame, a lot of self-blame and guilt. They could feel helpless and trapped, and even suicidal thoughts or actions, among others. But that's a little bit of a different set of presenting symptoms because of the complex trauma, the re-traumatization over and over.
You know, what's interesting is when I hear Jennifer, when I hear you talk about that, Nancy, one of the things that I remember about last week, we were on with the Gwinnett Concussion Institute, and how repeat trauma just forces you. It forces the length of your treatment or the length of your recovery to be significantly longer, simply based on the repeat trauma. Nancy, I want to ask you a question about the people who we serve in shelter and supportive housing. What do we do with the survivor? How do we support? Really, it's just more, how do we support a survivor that presents with various mental health issues that are already currently at, that they're in our care, they're in our supportive housing or in our shelter services?
Well, I think that was one of the reasons that I reached out to Viewpoint and talked about us doing some of this work together, is because I heard frequently from staff that they were working with survivors in the shelter and in supportive housing that had mental health issues, and they really didn't know how to address that. They didn't understand it. They didn't know what that behavior looked like, or why the behavior looked the way it did, and they didn't know how to work with that behavior based upon it maybe being a mental health issue. So it's part of the intake and assessment that we do. If they have had mental health issues, we'll talk about, are they currently getting treatment? Do they currently have someone that they're seeing? Do they have their medication? And if the answers to that are no, then we will we'll hook them up with Viewpoint, with Mercy, with the organization, or as Shatel said, if they have private insurance and they've had a doctor that they've used but maybe been denied access, we will try to get them connected with a mental health provider that can meet those needs, address those needs, that has that knowledge and training. But then also we're working to get our staff more trained about mental health and what it looks like and how it might present, so that our staff can be sensitive and appropriate in addressing it. Awesome.
Shatel, I want to bounce over to you, because one of the things that I think we often overlook when we talk about domestic violence is our children. So is what we discussed today the same for a child who is either victimized themselves or or has watched the domestic violence happen and occur in the life of a loved one?
So yes and no. My answers are always going to be nuanced.
Like there's just no straightforward, like, yes.
No, there's no black and white when it comes to mental health.
Easy answers only.
So children can experience those symptoms. They can experience those depressive symptoms, those anxiety symptoms. There are a lot of diagnoses we stay away from when it comes to children, because they're still developing, they're still going through those milestones. But I will say what the research has shown, and I think we see this just in our everyday life, is that it affects children pervasively. If you look at the statistics when it comes to children and just their outcomes when they become adults and they're exposed to domestic violence, I mean, the numbers they're hard to watch and hard to know that the children are going to the risk of becoming a bully themselves or becoming an abuser, the risk of being victimized, the risk of having long-term mental health issues, it affects children more, and I'll say more pervasively as well. But I think when it comes to both domestic violence and mental health, we've been so good at making sure we have specialized staff, because some people that are trained in helping adults, they're just not trained in helping children, and recognizing those milestones and how those traumas can be integrated in those milestones. Yeah. So when you think of things like self-esteem, you think of socializing and how people socialize with others and how we learn to socialize as children. If those are colored through the lens of mental health barriers for yourself or your parent, or they're colored through the lens of domestic violence, it's going to be completely different when you grow up and you try to socialize with individuals or interact with individuals on a different level. We know that many people who grow up to be adults who are victimized were also victimized as children or witnessed those traumas as children. We also need to pay attention to when, if you look at, and this is a statistic that we know in-house, but I don't think many people know this outside, when you look at mass shootings and its relationship to domestic violence, and when that person was a child, we know that this affects people long-term. So yes, children can have some of those symptoms. We may not have a diagnosis or a formal diagnosis or assessment on the child, but it definitely affects them going forward.
Man, so I want to make sure I have one question for each one of you guys left, and I want to make sure as we before we wrap, I want to let the audience know again, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We'll be more than happy to answer them on air. And then before, right after we're done, I will do my best. I'll remember to post the contact information for Viewpoint Health, because I do want to make sure that if somebody's watching this today and they're like, hey, yep, I need somebody, I need to talk, right? I want to make sure that they have access to that, because Jennifer did say very early on that they're open, they're ready to receive anybody who needs support. And obviously I'll post our crisis line number as well, because if you're watching today, or if you know somebody that needs our services, feel free, you can call the crisis line and talk about how can I best support a survivor in this time. But then also if you know that, hey, this person needs the help and they need to get out of a bad situation, we want that person to in turn call the crisis line so we can get them some services. So Nancy, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to ask you your last, well, not really your last question. If somebody asks you a question, I'll make sure to throw it to you. But I want to talk about how important is a survivor support system to them as they recover?
It's incredibly important. One of the components that abusers use is to isolate the victim from friends, from family, from the community, where it gets to the point that the abuser's reality is the only reality that's present and available to the survivor. And generally that the abuser's reality and what they're telling the survivor is, it's your fault, you make me do this, you're stupid, you're crazy, you're incompetent, you should be glad that you have me, nobody would want you besides me. And so that becomes the victim's reality. And so as they go through the process of getting away from that violence and finding themselves again and getting help and support for whatever additional issues there are, to have people around them that are now saying, it's not your fault. It's not because you're crazy. You're amazing. You survived this. You've shown incredible strength. And look at these steps that you've been brave enough to take to move forward. And how amazing it is that, given how much mental health is stigmatized, that you're willing to say, yeah, I have this issue and I'm going to get help with it and I'm going to get better. So to be surrounded by those group of people that are really affirming your journey and your courage and your strength, and that are willing to walk through that with you, it's incredibly important.
Nancy, you brought up pieces of a question that is in the comment section from Sam. And so Sam's question is, there are so many stigmas about mental health and about domestic violence victimization. How can we encourage people to reach out? And so, so you touched on some of that, but I want to open that question up to Shatel or Jennifer, or anybody else who feels like they want to answer that. How can we encourage people to reach out for help?
So I think the question it's a layered answer.
Of course, with you, it's a layered answer.
Welcome to my world. I think part of it is what we have been doing, where we're training not only our in-house staff, but our partner agencies. I have to give a quick shout out to DeKalb, who's been training their sheriff's officers in crisis intervention training. All of their officers are being trained in crisis intervention. So it's partly the community, the providers knowing that, hey, this is something that is pervasive in the community. These things often overlap or intersect at some level, and we have to be able to have resources available on both ends. So that's part of it. I think part of it too is just our marketing and our advertising, knowing that, hey, these are stigmas, they exist. We try to also debunk the myths when we're having these conversations. So every presentation we do, every Facebook Live, you'll hear us talk about what the myths are and what the facts are. And the numbers, especially in this pandemic, are going up. Domestic violence incidents are going up. Individuals reporting mental health issues are wanting to have some type of therapy, or even if it's not for them, for their children. Those are a lot of referrals that we're receiving right now. My child is terrified to go outside and play with other children, as they should be. We're having those conversations, not just in-house. We're talking to our partners. We're debunking the myths and just letting people know that we are here. If you have even if you feel it's the silliest question, call us. We're going to answer it. We're going to work through it with you. We're not saying you have to come into Safe House. We're not saying you have to be on a 72-hour hold. We're not saying, it could just be a phone conversation or an email. Reach out to us. Let's have that conversation, and you'll realize on the other end, there is peace. There is a life without violence. There is a life in recovery. So we're kind of just working at every end right now.
Yeah. Another question. I told everybody to buckle up for this conversation, but there's another question. What can you say to a survivor who feels responsible to stay in a relationship because their partner has mental health issues, or because they're the dependent partner for health insurance and mental health services? So that's a very layered question. I will not give it to Shatel. But I mean, that's a thing, right? So what can we say to survivors who feel responsible to stay in their relationship because their partner has a mental health issue?
Well, I think that that's something that survivors hear often. I need you. If you leave me, I'm going to change. I'm going to get better. But I can only do that if I have you by my side. As long as you're by my side, I'm not going to do this again. I know it's wrong. And unfortunately, that cycle of violence continues, where generally the violence erupts again. So I think what I would say to survivors, I can't tell you the number of times when I've been on the crisis line and I've heard, but I love him. And I say, you know what, that's fine. You can keep loving him, but you still have a right to be safe, and you still have a right to not be hurt. And I've also heard so often on the crisis line, well, just tell me how to change him. I just need to be able to know how to change him. And so what I've said is, you absolutely can't change him. He is the only one that can change himself. He has to make the decision to do that. So what I would say to that survivor is, you can keep loving him. You can keep caring about him. If you can leave and stay married so he can still access your health insurance and get the help that he needs. But he has to make the decision to get the help, and he has to do the work to get better. And you can't make him do that. And you have a right to be safe. You have a right to be free of abuse, and you have a right for your children to be free of the trauma and violence that they're experiencing at home. And you know what? If you leave, and if he really wants to get help, he's going to get that regardless of whether you're there or not.
Awesome. Jennifer, I think you said you motioned like you were ready to say something. So.
Well, I was just you said it beautifully, Nancy. The only thing that I would add is that if insurance does become an issue, there are services. I mean, we take individuals who don't have insurance, who are low and who don't have the income. The help is still readily available. So it's not a barrier to getting help for the individual.
Awesome. I love the fact that you guys, and both organizations, spend so much of their financial equity removing barriers. And I think that says a lot about where your heart is as an organization. If you're saying, and what I'm hearing from both organizations is, there is no excuse for you not to seek care no matter where you are, right? Whether it's financial, emotional, whatever excuse you can think of to not seek care, both organizations have said, no, pick up the phone and call us. We have your back. So I love that about both awards. So go ahead.
One thing real quick, especially during this time, COVID has enabled us to have a telehealth waiver. So in the past, when we couldn't provide telehealth services other than but with a psychiatrist, now because of the waiver, if you don't have transportation, if you don't feel comfortable leaving your house, you have access to care just right there on your phone, or we can provide services over the phone or over video conferencing in a secure, HIPAA compliant, confidential way. And look at that, you've got my website pulled up.
There you go, it's right there. Because actually that was gonna be something I was gonna ask you about, was telehealth. I do want you maybe to dive a little bit deeper into what that looks like. And I promised everybody I had one question left for everybody. So let's just make this the last question that I asked Jennifer, I promise maybe. But talk about your telehealth options, because I do think that that's very important to what we're doing today.
So all of our services are available via telehealth right now. You don't even have to come in for an initial assessment. You can call our number there, which is 678-209-2411. We have another number for Spanish speakers, but all services, we can do an assessment. You can see a psychiatrist. You can continue on with individual therapy. We even have some groups that can be offered via telehealth, but there's no barriers to that care right now. And we want people to stay safe in the middle of a pandemic. If you are not comfortable leaving your house, or if you have transportation issues, this is the time right now to access care. If people are concerned about stigma and don't want to be walking into a building that is known to provide services to mental health, for mental health issues, you can just do it from the safety and security of your living room or your bedroom or wherever. And if you don't have access to the internet and you don't have access to a computer or a smartphone where you can use a video, we can provide services just over the phone.
You know, and I do want to also add that people can't use the excuse anymore that, well, I can't get to you guys, because I literally just went here and I didn't know you guys had so many locations. So you guys are servicing, you know, Gwinnett, DeKalb, Newton, Rockdale County. So you're all over the place.
And we're in your living room.
Yes, exactly. Yes, right now we're in your living room. So I do want to. Okay, so this is always an important question. I think it's the question we use to close out every live, and it always goes to our guests. So Nancy and I probably won't answer this question, but Shatel and Jennifer, I do want to get you guys to speak to survivors directly. And what's the one thing you would like to say to a survivor that may be watching this today? So Shatel, Jennifer, in that order.
Okay, so I was like, so should I go first? You said in that order. Yes,
I got you.
Good. So I do want to say suffering is not a superpower. Staying with someone because you feel like you want to save that person or you owe it to that person, it's not a superpower. It's not a strength. You've been strong long enough. Let us be strong for you just for a while until you can get back on your feet. Let us help you with whatever services you may need. And again, that doesn't have to necessarily be that you're leaving the relationship. If you just need us to safety plan with you so you know how to be safe while you stay in that relationship. If you just need those mental health services or our support groups so you can listen to the stories and the narratives of other people so you know what they did, we're here to help. Always 24 hours a day, we have a crisis line available to you. So please come in, let us help you in whatever way you need help.
Man, okay, Jennifer, I'm going to let you answer the question, I promise. But I literally had to write that down. I had to write down suffering is not a superpower because I feel like now I have to build a whole marketing campaign around it. And Jennifer, tell Chad he can't have it. But yeah, so suffering is not a superpower. That's an amazing thought process. And yeah, I'm going to have to figure out how to make that happen. So Jennifer, same question. What's the one thing you want to tell a survivor that may be watching this right now?
Well, I'm not going to come up with the perfect tagline that quick. That's her superpower.
Hit the bar pretty high there, Jennifer.
But I do want to say that struggling with mental illness is something that many people do on their own and alone for years without getting help. In fact, 1 in 5, depending on what you're looking at, 1 in 5, 1 in 4 Americans will have a diagnosable mental illness, but 60% don't get treatment. So don't be that 60%. Come in, get treatment, get care. Don't struggle alone anymore. And mental illness is treatable. It's treatable. And help is readily accessible, again, especially now with telehealth. And it doesn't have to be permanent. Just because you're taking medication right now to help you get through a rough time doesn't mean that you're going to be taking it for the rest of your life. You might even not need medication. You might just need some therapy. So but go ahead and reach out and seek help. In the past, people might call and try to get an appointment, and then you have to wait a few weeks to come in. Right now, it's at the touch of your smartphone or of your computer. So please reach out to us. We're here to help, and it's confidential. It's readily accessible, and we want to be here to help you through this.
Okay, quick, Jennifer, one more time, phone number that they can reach Viewpoint Health.
678-209-2411.
No excuses.
No excuses.
All right. No insurance, no barriers. Pick up the phone. If you're somebody who has a mental health issue and you need it, Jennifer just said, pick up the phone and call her. Ask for her directly. I'm kidding. Don't do that. They have great people. But so, Nancy, same question. If somebody needs PADV support, how can they get it?
They can call our hotline, 404-843-1766. And that's a great entryway to all of our services, to shelter, to community-based virtual support groups, to our legal advocacy, to supportive housing. We've also been fortunate through some COVID CARES emergency grants to have funds to provide emergency financial assistance. So if someone's lost their job and is at risk of being evicted, we can help with short-term rent, with utilities. So if you need help because of DV, give us a call.
Again, no excuses. Nancy just gave you the number. And I think part of our job, Nancy and I's job, is to raise money so that all our services remain free. So again, if there's a financial concern, throw it out the window, because the organization is in great financial position to make sure that all of our services are free and will remain free for the foreseeable future. So pick up the phone and call our crisis line today. I'm going to wrap us up, man. We've been at this conversation for 57 minutes.
Oh, wow.
57 minutes. And I promised you guys that it was going to be 30. And so I think that just speaks to how awesome that you guys are. And there's a wealth of knowledge. There were so many comments of people just wanting to know more information and asking questions. So you guys are awesome. And I appreciate you guys so much for being a part of it. I just want to say thank you again to everybody who watched us today. Our friends over at Peace Place were watching us again. Antoine, we thank you so much. And we're sorry for the loss of your sister. So just know that our organization is here for you. And if there's services, if there's support groups, if there's mental health things that you would like to talk through, brother, please pick up the phone and call Viewpoint Health or call PADV. We'd love to support you as you grieve. And so, again, we thank all our hosts. If there's something that PADV can do for you, please pick up the phone and call our crisis line. We're right there for you. All of our social channels are at PADV Atlanta. And so if there's something that if you'd like to follow us for more information, you can reach us that way. No matter where you are in the continental United States, you can pick up the phone and call PADV and we will support you. So we appreciate you guys for watching today. Tune in. We have not released our July Facebook Live schedule, but it's in the works. So we will be live again in July with more great conversations. So thank you guys for watching. We appreciate you. We love you. Have a great day.